The screaming started at dawn when Katherine Caldwell stumbled into Cripple Creek with blood on her dress and terror in her eyes that no 17-hour stagecoach ride could explain. Decker Wright was watering his horse outside the saloon when he heard the commotion, and something about the way she flinched at the sound of a door slamming made him set down his bucket with unusual care. The woman could not have been more than 22 or 23, with dark hair tangled around her shoulders and a carpetbag clutched so tightly her knuckles had gone white. She stood in the middle of the dusty street like a deer that had wandered into a wolf den, her green eyes darting from the general store to the blacksmith shop to the crowd gathering around her with the kind of morbid curiosity that small mining towns specialized in. "Miss, are you hurt?" Old Pete from the assay office called out, his voice booming across the morning air. Katherine jumped so violently she nearly dropped her bag. Her whole body went rigid, and Decker saw her chest heaving with rapid breaths that spoke of panic rather than exertion. Without thinking about it much, he stepped forward, keeping his boots light on the wooden boardwalk, and raised one hand slowly where she could see it. "Easy now," he said, his voice barely above a murmur. "Nobody here means you any harm." Her eyes found his, and for a moment, the terror in them hit him like a physical blow. This was not just a woman who had traveled too far too fast. This was someone who had seen something or experienced something that had carved fear into her bones. Decker was 30 years old and had spent half his life working cattle drives and the other half trying to make an honest living in the gold fields of Colorado. He knew the look of someone running from something real. "I need to see the sheriff," Katherine said, her voice thin and strained. "That would be Sheriff McComb," Decker replied, still keeping his tone gentle. "His office is just down the street here. I can walk you there if you would like." She nodded, but when someone dropped a crate behind them at the general store, she whirled around with a strangled gasp, her whole body trembling. Decker made a mental note of it and gestured with a slow, deliberate movement for her to follow him. As they walked, he noticed how she kept to his right side, as though she wanted something solid between herself and the buildings. He also noticed how she flinched every time a miner called out to another, or when a wagon rattled past, or when the wind caught a loose shutter and made it bang against the wall. Sheriff Thomas McComb was a solid man in his 50s with a gray mustache and the kind of weathered face that came from too many years squinting into the sun. He stood up from his desk when Decker guided Katherine into the small office, and he had the good sense not to ask his questions too loudly. "Madam, I'm Sheriff McComb. What brings you to Cripple Creek?" Katherine set her carpetbag down carefully and clasped her hands together. "My name is Katherine Caldwell. I came from Denver on yesterday's stage. I am looking for my aunt, Margaret Porter. She runs a boarding house here, or she used to." "Mrs. Porter passed on about 3 months back," the sheriff said, his voice sympathetic. "Fever took her quick. I am sorry for your loss." The color drained from Katherine's face. She swayed slightly, and Decker moved without thinking, steadying her elbow with a gentle touch. She did not pull away, which told him just how shaken she was. "Then I have nowhere to go," she whispered. "What about family back in Denver?" Sheriff McComb asked. Katherine's jaw tightened. "I cannot go back there." The way she said it made both men exchange glances. Decker recognized the tone of someone making a statement of fact rather than preference. He also noticed the fading bruise on her wrist that her sleeve did not quite cover. "Miss Caldwell," Decker said softly, "there is a boarding house on the edge of town run by a woman named Mrs. Henley. She has a room or two available, and she is good people. If you need a place to stay while you figure things out, I could walk you over there." Katherine looked at him with those frightened green eyes, and he saw her trying to decide whether to trust him. "Why are you helping me?" "Because you look like you could use some help," Decker replied simply. "And because this town can be rough if you do not know anyone. My name is Decker Wright. I work at the Molly Kathleen mine during the week and help out at the livery on Sundays. I have lived here 2 years, and I can promise you that Mrs. Henley will treat you right." Sheriff McComb nodded. "Decker's telling it straight. Mrs. Henley is decent folk." Katherine drew in a shaky breath. "I have some money, not much, but I can pay for a room for a few weeks at least. I will need to find work." "What kind of work did you do in Denver?" the sheriff asked. "I was a teacher. Well, I was training to be one. I taught at a small school for 2 years." "Cripple Creek could use a proper teacher," Decker said thoughtfully. "Most of the children around here get their lessons from whoever has time, which is not often. If you wanted to talk to Reverend Michaels at the church, he has been trying to organize something more permanent. For the first time since she had arrived, a flicker of hope crossed Catherine's face. I would like that. Decker picked up her carpet bag before she could protest, keeping his movements slow and visible. Let me take you to Mrs. Henley's place. It is about a 10-minute walk. As they left the sheriff's office, Decker made a point of staying on Catherine's left side, so he was between her and the busier part of the street. He also adjusted his pace to match hers, which was slower than he usually walked. When they passed the blacksmith shop and the hammer struck the anvil with a loud clang, Katherine jumped again, her hand flying to her chest. Decker stopped walking and waited until she looked at him. Sorry, should have warned you we were passing the smithy. It gets loud. It is not your fault, Katherine said, but her voice was shaking. I am just being foolish. No, you are not, Decker said firmly but gently. You are having a reaction to something. That is not the same as being foolish. She studied his face for a long moment, and he saw some of the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. You are very kind. Just treating you the way anyone should, Decker replied. He resumed walking, making sure to place his feet carefully on the boards so his boots did not thump too hard. Mrs. Henley's boarding house was a 2-story building painted white with blue shutters, set back from the main street where things were quieter. The older woman who answered the door had a round face and quick eyes that took in Catherine's disheveled appearance without judgment. Mrs. Henley, this is Miss Katherine Caldwell, Decker said, keeping his voice low and even. She just arrived in town and needs a room. She can pay. Mrs. Henley smiled warmly. Of course. Come in, dear. I have a nice room on the second floor that gets good light. It is quiet up there, too. Catherine's eyes welled up with tears at the mention of quiet. That sounds perfect. Decker set her carpet bag down in the hallway and tipped his hat. I will let you get settled, Miss Caldwell. If you need anything or want me to introduce you to Reverend Michaels, I am usually at the livery on Sunday mornings. Thank you, Mr. Wright, Katherine said, and this time, when she looked at him, there was genuine gratitude in her expression. You have been incredibly kind to a stranger. Anyone would have done the same, Decker said, though they both knew that was not entirely true. He left her there with Mrs. Henley and headed back toward town, but his mind stayed on the frightened woman with the green eyes. Something had happened to her in Denver, something bad enough to send her running to an aunt she had not seen in who knew how long, only to find that refuge gone. And whatever it was, had left her jumping at every unexpected sound like a spooked horse. Over the next week, Decker found himself thinking about Katherine Caldwell more than he probably should. He was not the type to get tangled up in other people's business without cause, but something about her situation bothered him. On Saturday evening, he ran into Mrs. Henley at the general store, and he could not help asking how the new boarder was settling in. Poor thing barely leaves her room except for meals, Mrs. Henley said, shaking her head. She is polite as can be, but she is wound tighter than a clock spring, jumps every time someone comes in the door. I have been trying to get her to eat more, but she picks at her food like a little bird. Has she gone to see the Reverend about teaching? Not yet. I think she's still working up the nerve to go out in public. Between you and me, Decker, I think someone hurt that girl badly. She has nightmares that wake her up crying. Decker's jaw clenched. You think she was running from a man? I would bet money on it, Mrs. Henley said quietly. But she has not said anything, and I will not push her. She will talk when she is ready. That night, Decker lay in his small room above the livery and stared at the ceiling. He thought about his own mother, who had died when he was 12. She had been a gentle woman, quick to laugh, and always ready with a kind word. His father had been a good man, too, strict but fair, who had taught Decker the value of hard work and treating people with respect. They had both been gone now for years, his mother to illness and his father to a riding accident. But they had left him with a solid foundation of what was right and wrong. Hurting women was definitely on the wrong side of that line. Sunday morning dawned clear and cool, with that particular quality of light that September brought to the Colorado mountains. Decker finished his chores at the livery earlier than usual and took extra care with his appearance, washing up properly and putting on his good shirt. He told himself it was because he went to church most Sundays anyway, but deep down, he knew he was hoping to see Katherine. She was not at the service. Decker tried not to feel too disappointed as he sat through Reverend Michael's sermon about compassion and second chances. Afterward, as people mingled outside the small church, He approached the Reverend and mentioned Catherine's situation. A trained teacher? Reverend Michael's face lit up. That would be an answer to many prayers. We have been trying to get a proper school going for months now. Do you think she would be willing to meet with me? I think she would, Decker said. But Reverend, you should know she is dealing with something difficult. She startles easily. You will want to approach her gently. The older man's expression turned serious. I understand. Thank you for telling me, Decker. Do you think you could introduce us? She might feel more comfortable if she knows you. I can do that. After church, Decker walked to Mrs. Henley's boarding house. He knocked softly on the front door, and when Mrs. Henley answered, she smiled knowingly. She is in the parlor, the older woman said. Reading. Go on in. Decker found Katherine sitting in a chair by the window, a book in her lap. She was wearing a simple blue dress, and her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun. She looked up when he entered, and he saw the wariness flash across her face before she recognized him. Mr. Wright, she said, setting the book aside. Miss Caldwell, I hope I'm not disturbing you. Not at all. She gestured to the chair across from her. Please, sit down. Decker removed his hat and sat carefully, making sure not to drop into the chair too hard. I spoke with Reverend Michaels after church this morning. He would very much like to meet with you about starting a school here in Cripple Creek. He says the town has been needing a proper teacher for a long time. Catherine's eyes brightened with interest, but her hands twisted together in her lap. I would like to meet him, but I have to tell you, Mr. Wright, I am not sure I am in any condition to be teaching children right now. I can barely manage to walk down the street without feeling like I am going to come apart. Her honesty surprised him, and he appreciated it. What happened to you in Denver, Miss Caldwell, if you do not mind my asking? She was quiet for a long moment, and Decker did not push. He had learned patience working with horses and cattle. Sometimes you had to wait for a creature to trust you enough to approach. Finally, Katherine spoke, her voice low. I was engaged to be married. His name was Richard Pemberton. He came from a good family, had money, seemed respectable. Everyone said I was lucky to have caught his attention. She paused, swallowing hard. For the first few months, he was wonderful, charming, attentive, generous. Then things started to change. He became possessive. He did not want me teaching anymore, did not want me seeing my friends. He said it was because he loved me, because he wanted to protect me. Decker's hands clenched on his knees, but he kept his expression neutral, giving her space to continue. The first time he hit me was 3 months ago. He apologized, brought me flowers, swore it would never happen again. But it did. Again and again. Each time was worse than the last. He would scream at me over nothing, then hit me, then cry and beg for forgiveness. I tried to leave twice, but he found me both times. The second time, he beat me so badly I could not walk for 3 days. How did you get away? Decker asked softly. His family sent him to Colorado Springs on business. He was supposed to be gone for 2 weeks. I sold everything I had and took the first stage to Denver and then here. My aunt was the only family I had left. I thought if I could just get to her, I would be safe. But now she is gone, and I do not know what to do. I am terrified he is going to find me. Tears were streaming down her face now, and Decker reached into his pocket for a clean handkerchief, extending it to her slowly. She took it with shaking hands. Miss Caldwell, you need to tell Sheriff McComb all of this. He needs to know there might be a man coming looking for you. What good would that do? Katherine asked bitterly. We were engaged. Most people would say he had the right to discipline his future wife. And his family has money and influence. Who is going to believe me over him? I believe you, Decker said firmly. And I think Sheriff McComb will too. He is a good man. And whether that bastard in Denver thinks he had the right or not, he does not have any right to you here. Colorado is not some lawless territory anymore. We have laws against assault, even if some folks do not want to enforce them properly. Katherine wiped her eyes. Why do you care so much, Mr. Wright? You do not even know me. Because nobody deserves what he did to you, Decker said simply. And because I can see you are trying to put yourself back together, and that takes courage. The least I can do is help make sure you have a chance to do it safely. Something shifted in Katherine's expression, a softening around her eyes. You are a good man. I try to be, Decker said. Now, what do you say we go talk to the sheriff together? And then, maybe afterward, if you are feeling up to it, we could stop by and see Reverend Michaels. But only if you want to. No pressure. Katherine drew in a deep breath and nodded. "All right, let me get my shawl." The walk to the sheriff's office was slow and deliberate. Decker kept himself positioned between Katherine and the busiest part of the street, and whenever they approached something that might make noise, he warned her quietly beforehand. When a dog barked suddenly from an alley, Katherine flinched hard, but Decker just kept walking at the same steady pace, giving her time to recover without making a fuss about it. Sheriff McComb listened to Katherine's story with a grave expression, taking notes and asking a few clarifying questions in a gentle tone. When she finished, he set down his pencil and looked at her seriously. "Miss Caldwell, I want you to know I take this very seriously. If this Richard Pemberton shows up in Cripple Creek, he will be arrested on sight for assault. I will also send a telegram to the sheriff in Denver, letting him know the situation. I cannot promise they will do anything on their end, especially if his family has influence, but at least there will be a record of your complaint." "Thank you, Sheriff," Katherine said quietly. "In the meantime, I want you to be careful. Stick to well-traveled areas during the day, and do not go out alone at night. If you see anyone suspicious, or if anyone starts asking questions about you, come straight to me." Katherine nodded, and Decker could see her hands trembling again. He stood up carefully. "Ready to go see the Reverend?" She managed a small smile. "Yes, thank you for coming with me." Reverend Michaels was working in his small office behind the church when they arrived. He greeted Katherine warmly, but without too much enthusiasm, seeming to sense her fragility. They talked for nearly an hour about what a school in Cripple Creek might look like, how many students there might be, what subjects Katherine was qualified to teach. By the end of the conversation, her eyes were brighter than Decker had seen them, and there was actual color in her cheeks. "I think we can start with classes 3 days a week," Reverend Michaels said. "We will use the church basement. It is dry and has good windows for light. We can start getting the word out this week, and you can begin teaching by the end of the month if you are ready." "I am ready," Katherine said, and Decker heard the determination in her voice. "Thank you for this opportunity, Reverend." As they left the church, Katherine turned to Decker with a genuine smile. "I cannot believe this is happening. A few hours ago, I felt completely lost. Now, I have a purpose again." "You always had a purpose," Decker said. "You just needed someone to help you see it." They walked back toward Mrs. Henley's boarding house, and this time, Katherine seemed less tense, though she still jumped when a wagon rattled past. Decker found himself wanting to help her with that, to find a way to make her feel safe again. It was more than just basic human decency at this point. He was starting to genuinely care about what happened to her. "Mr. Wright," Katherine said as they reached the boarding house steps, "would you like to come for dinner tonight? Mrs. Henley sets a good table, and I would like to thank you properly for everything you have done." Decker smiled. "I would like that very much, Miss Caldwell." That evening marked the beginning of something neither of them had quite expected. Decker arrived at exactly 6 o'clock, washed and presentable, and found Katherine waiting in the parlor. She had changed into a green dress that brought out her eyes, and she had done something different with her hair that made her look softer, younger. Mrs. Henley had prepared a feast of roast chicken, potatoes, vegetables, and fresh bread, and the 4 boarders who lived there joined them around the big dining table. Decker made sure to move his chair slowly when he sat down, and he kept his voice low and even during the conversation. He noticed Katherine watching him, and he wondered if she realized he was doing it deliberately. Probably she did. She was intelligent. That much was clear from how she talked about teaching methods and books she had read. After dinner, they sat in the parlor while Mrs. Henley brought coffee. The other boarders had retired to their rooms, and the house was quiet except for the gentle ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. "Can I ask you something personal, Mr. Wright?" Katherine said. "Decker, please. And yes, you can ask. Why are you not married? A man like you, decent and kind. I would think women would be lining up." Decker chuckled. "I have been working most of my life, first on cattle drives, then in the mines here. Have not really had time for courting. Plus, I have not met anyone who made me want to make the time." He paused, then added carefully. "Until recently, maybe." Katherine looked at him over her coffee cup, and he saw understanding dawn in her eyes. "Oh, I do not mean to make you uncomfortable," Decker said quickly. "I know you have been through something terrible, and you need time to heal. I am not expecting anything from you. I just wanted to be honest." "I appreciate your honesty," Katherine said softly, "and you do not make me uncomfortable. You are actually the first person in a very long time who makes me feel safe." Those words settled into Decker's chest like a warm coal. "Good. That is all I want. Katherine, for you to feel safe." The use of her first name hung in the air between them, intimate and significant. She did not correct him or pull back. Instead, she smiled, and it was like watching the sun come out from behind clouds. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable pattern. Decker continued working at the mine during the week, but he made a point of stopping by Mrs. Henley's boarding house most evenings to check on Katherine. They would sit in the parlor and talk, sometimes for hours, about everything and nothing. She told him about growing up in a small town in Kansas, about losing her parents to cholera when she was 16, about her love of books and teaching. He told her about his childhood in Nebraska, about his parents, about the years he had spent driving cattle up from Texas, and the day he decided he wanted to stop wandering and put down roots. Katherine started teaching at the church basement on the last Monday of September. She had 9 students ranging from age 6 to 14, children of miners and shopkeepers who were hungry for learning. Decker made sure to walk her to and from the church on teaching days, carrying her books and materials. He noticed that she still jumped at sudden sounds, but it was getting less severe. She was learning that not every loud noise meant danger. One evening in early October, they were walking back from the church when a drunk miner stumbled out of a saloon, shouting something incomprehensible. Katherine froze, her whole body going rigid, and Decker saw the panic flood her eyes. Without thinking, he stepped between her and the drunk man, shielding her with his body. "Easy, Tom," Decker said calmly to the miner. "Time to go sleep it off." The man grumbled but wandered away, and Decker turned back to Katherine. She was shaking, her arms wrapped around herself. Slowly, carefully, Decker reached out and touched her shoulder. "You are safe. He is gone. Just a drunk who had too much whiskey." Katherine nodded, but she could not seem to stop shaking. Decker made a quick decision and gently guided her off the main street into a quieter alley where there was a bench outside the general store's back entrance. He sat down and patted the space beside him. "Sit with me for a minute. Just breathe." She sat, and they stayed there in the quiet for several minutes, while Katherine worked on calming herself down. Decker did not talk or push her. He just sat close enough that she could feel his presence, but not so close that he crowded her. Finally, Katherine spoke. "I am sorry. I thought I was getting better." "You are getting better," Decker said firmly. "Katherine, 6 weeks ago, you could barely walk down the street. Now you are teaching 9 children and having conversations with people around town. What just happened? That is your mind trying to protect you from danger. It is not weakness. It is your body remembering what happened and trying to keep you safe." "It is exhausting," Katherine whispered. "I am so tired of being afraid." "I know," Decker said gently, "but it will get better. It just takes time. And until it does, I will be right here, helping however I can." Katherine turned to look at him, and in the fading light, her eyes were luminous. "Why are you so good to me?" "Because you deserve goodness," Decker said simply. "And because I care about you, Katherine, more than I probably should, given how recently you came into my life. But I cannot seem to help it." She reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. It was the first time she had initiated physical contact, and Decker felt his heart skip. Her hand was small and warm in his, and he closed his fingers around it gently, careful not to hold too tight. "I care about you too," Katherine said. "It scares me, how much I care. I did not think I would ever want to be close to a man again after Richard. But you are nothing like him, Decker. Nothing at all." They sat there holding hands as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. When they finally stood to continue walking, Decker did not let go of her hand, and Katherine did not pull away. They walked back to the boarding house like that, connected in a way that felt both new and inevitable. Mrs. Henley took one look at their joined hands when they entered and smiled like she had won a bet with herself. Over the next month, Decker and Katherine's relationship deepened naturally, like a river finding its course. He was unfailingly patient with her, learning the things that triggered her fear and doing his best to minimize them. He learned to stomp his boots on the porch before entering a room so she would hear him coming. He learned to speak her name softly before approaching her from behind. He learned that thunder made her anxious, so on stormy nights he would sit with her in the parlor and distract her with stories until the weather passed. Katherine, for her part, began to trust him in ways that clearly surprised her. She let him hold her hand in public. She laughed at his jokes, a sound that got easier and more frequent as the weeks passed. She started to relax when he was near, her shoulders dropping from their perpetual tension, her breathing getting deeper and more even. One evening in late October, she fell asleep with her head on his shoulder while they sat in the parlor, and Decker stayed perfectly still for an hour rather than wake her, marveling at the trust that represented. The first snow came in early November, dusting the mountains in white and turning Cripple Creek into a scene from a painting. Katherine's school was thriving, with 2 more students joining and parents praising her methods. She had found a confidence in teaching that carried over into the rest of her life. She walked taller now, spoke more freely, smiled more often. But the shadow of Richard Pemberton still hung over everything. Katherine had nightmares sometimes, waking up crying from dreams where he found her and dragged her back to Denver. Decker had learned to recognize the signs the next morning, the dark circles under her eyes, and the way her hands shook a little more than usual. On those days, he was extra gentle, extra patient, reminding her without words that she was safe. Then one cold afternoon in mid-November, Sheriff McComb came to find Decker at the mine with news that made his blood run cold. "Got a telegram from Denver," the sheriff said grimly. "Someone has been asking around about Katherine Caldwell, man matching Richard Pemberton's description. He has not left Denver as far as they know, but he is definitely looking for her." Decker's jaw clenched. "Does Katherine know?" "Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first, see how you thought we should handle it." "We need to tell her," Decker said. "She deserves to know. But I want to be there when you do." They found Katherine at the church, just finishing up her lessons for the day. The children had left, and she was tidying up the slate boards and gathering books. She smiled when she saw Decker, but the smile faded when she noticed the sheriff behind him. "What is wrong?" she asked immediately. Sheriff McComb told her about the telegram as gently as he could, but there was no good way to deliver that kind of news. Katherine went pale, gripping the desk in front of her for support. "He is coming for me," she whispered. "We do not know that for certain," the sheriff said. "He is asking questions, but that does not mean he knows where you are." "He will find out," Katherine said, her voice rising with panic. "He always finds out. He has money and connections. He will hire someone to track me. Oh, God, I have to leave. I have to run again." "No," Decker said firmly, moving to her side. "You are not running anywhere. You have a life here now, Katherine. You have your students, your friends, a home. We are not letting him take that away from you." "You do not understand what he is capable of," Katherine said, tears streaming down her face. "He nearly killed me last time I tried to leave. If he finds me here, he will not just drag me back. He will hurt me in ways I cannot even think about." Decker took her hands, waiting until she looked at him. "Then we will make sure he does not find you. And if he does come here, he will have to go through me first, through all of us. This town protects its own. Katherine, you are one of us now." Sheriff McComb nodded. "Decker's right. If Pemberton shows up in Cripple Creek, he will find a very different reception than he is probably expecting. I will make sure every man in town knows to keep an eye out. And I will enforce the law. Money and influence be damned." Katherine was shaking, but she managed to nod. Decker pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully, letting her cry against his chest. He had never held her like this before, and he was intensely aware of how fragile she felt, how much trust it took for her to let him this close. "I have got you," he murmured into her hair. "I am not letting anything happen to you. I promise." That night, Decker did something he had been thinking about for weeks, but had not had the courage to do. After walking Katherine back to the boarding house and making sure she was as settled as she could be, he went to the small jeweler's shop on the edge of town. The owner, a German immigrant named Klaus, was about to close up, but he let Decker in when he saw the look on his face. "I need a ring," Decker said. Klaus raised his eyebrows. "Finally making an honest woman of Miss Caldwell? About time. It is not what you think. Well, it is, but not yet. I want to give her something that says I am committed to protecting her, to being there for her. But I do not want to pressure her into anything she is not ready for." Klaus thought about this for a moment, then pulled out a tray of rings. "What about this one? It is simple, elegant. You could give it to her as a promise ring, a symbol of your intentions without the weight of a full engagement." The ring was perfect, a delicate silver band with a small emerald that matched Katherine's eyes. Decker bought it and tucked the small box carefully into his coat pocket. He waited 2 days before giving it to her, wanting to make sure she had recovered somewhat from the shock of the sheriff's news. On Sunday evening, after dinner at the boarding house, he asked her to take a walk with him. It was cold outside, the kind of crisp November cold that made your breath fog in the air. But Katherine bundled up in her warmest shawl and took his arm. They walked to the edge of town, where there was a small overlook that gave a view of the mountains in the distance. The moon was nearly full, casting everything in silver light. Decker stopped there and turned to face Katherine. "I have something I want to say to you, and I want you to just listen until I am finished. Can you do that?" Katherine nodded, her eyes curious and a little worried. "These past 2 months have been some of the best of my life," Decker began. "Getting to know you, seeing you grow stronger and more confident, being part of your healing, it has meant more to me than I can properly express. I know you have been hurt badly, and I know you are still scared about what might happen, but I want you to know that I am not going anywhere. I am committed to you, to us, to whatever this is becoming between us." He pulled the small box from his pocket and opened it, showing her the ring. Katherine gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "This is not an engagement ring," Decker said quickly. "I know you are not ready for that yet, and I would never pressure you, but I want you to have it as a promise that I am here, that I will protect you, that when you are ready, whenever that is, I will ask you properly to be my wife. But for now, it is just a symbol of how much you mean to me." Tears were streaming down Katherine's face, but she was smiling. "Decker, I do not know what to say. You do not have to say anything. Just tell me if I can put it on your finger." Katherine held out her right hand, and Decker slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. She looked at it in the moonlight, then looked back up at him with an expression that made his heart ache. "I am falling in love with you," she said softly. "I did not think I could ever feel this way about anyone, especially not after what Richard did to me. But you make me feel safe and cherished and valued. You see me as a person, not as something to own or control. And yes, I am still scared. I am terrified that he is going to find me, that he is going to take all of this away. But when I am with you, the fear gets smaller. You make me feel like maybe, just maybe, I can have a real life again." "You can," Decker said fiercely. "And you will. We will make sure of it." He leaned down slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away if she wanted to, and kissed her. It was gentle and sweet and full of promise. Katherine kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, and for a moment everything else fell away. There was just the two of them, and the moonlight, and the beginning of something beautiful. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. They walked back to the boarding house hand in hand, and when Decker left her at the door, Katherine held up her hand to look at the ring one more time. "Thank you," she said, "for everything, for seeing me, for being patient, for not giving up on me." "I could never give up on you," Decker said simply. "You are worth fighting for." The next few weeks were a strange mix of happiness and tension. Decker and Katherine grew closer with each passing day, stealing kisses in quiet corners and holding hands whenever they walked together. Katherine's nightmares became less frequent, though they never fully went away. She was teaching full-time now, 5 days a week, and loving every minute of it. The children adored her, and their parents were grateful to have someone so dedicated and skilled teaching their young ones. But the shadow of Richard Pemberton loomed larger with each passing day. No more telegrams came from Denver, which somehow made things worse. Not knowing where he was or what he was planning was harder than knowing he was actively searching. Then, on a bitterly cold day in early December, Richard Pemberton arrived in Cripple Creek. Decker was at the mine when he heard about it. One of the other miners came running up to him, out of breath. "Decker, Sheriff McComb needs you in town right now. Says it is about Miss Caldwell." Decker did not wait for more explanation. He grabbed his coat and ran, his heart pounding with fear and fury. He found the sheriff outside his office, talking to a tall, well-dressed man in his 30s with dark hair and cold eyes. Katherine was there too, standing behind the sheriff, her face white as paper. The moment Richard Pemberton saw Katherine, his expression shifted into something possessive and cruel. "There you are. I have been looking everywhere for you, darling. Time to come home." "She is not going anywhere with you," Decker said, stepping forward. He made sure to keep his voice steady and calm, but there was iron underneath it. Pemberton looked at him with contempt, And who are you? Her new plaything? Katherine, have you been whoring yourself out to minors? How disappointing. Katherine flinched at the words, and Decker saw red. He moved faster than he had in years, getting right in Pemberton's face. You will not speak to her like that. Not here, not ever again. Or what? Pemberton sneered. You will hit me? I have lawyers who will bury you. Maybe, Decker said quietly. But it will be worth it. Gentlemen, that is enough, Sheriff McComb said, stepping between them. He looked at Pemberton with cold authority. Mr. Pemberton, I have received multiple reports of assault concerning your treatment of Miss Caldwell. She is not your wife, which means you have no legal claim to her whatsoever. If you do not leave Cripple Creek immediately, I will arrest you. On what charges? Pemberton demanded. I have not done anything. I am just here to collect my wayward fiancée. She is not your fiancée, Katherine said, and her voice was stronger than Decker expected. I broke our engagement 3 months ago when I left Denver. I am not coming back with you, Richard. I have a life here now. A life? Pemberton laughed cruelly. Teaching brats their ABCs in some godforsaken mining town? You are better than this, Katherine. You belong with me in Denver, living the life I can give you. You mean the life where you beat me until I could not stand? Katherine said, her voice rising. The life where you controlled every aspect of my existence? The life where I was terrified every moment of every day? No, thank you. I would rather live in poverty here than ever go back to that. Pemberton's face darkened. You ungrateful little witch. After everything I did for you, everything I gave you, you owe me. She does not owe you anything, Decker said, and you need to leave, now. For a moment, Pemberton looked like he might try to grab Katherine. Decker shifted his weight, ready to stop him if he tried, but the sheriff had drawn his gun, not pointing it at anyone, but making it very visible. Mr. Pemberton, I am going to count to 10. If you are not on your horse and heading out of town by the time I reach 10, you are spending the night in my jail cell. 1, 2. Pemberton's eyes flicked between the sheriff, Decker, and Katherine. He was clearly calculating his options and not liking any of them. This is not over, he said to Katherine. You are mine. You will always be mine. 3, 4. With a final glare, Pemberton turned and walked to his horse, which was tied up outside the general store. He mounted up and rode out of town at a fast clip. Decker did not relax until he was completely out of sight. The moment he was gone, Katherine's knees buckled. Decker caught her before she hit the ground, holding her as she sobbed. She was shaking so hard he could feel it through both their coats. You were so brave, he murmured into her hair. You stood up to him. You did not let him intimidate you. I thought I was going to die, Katherine gasped through her tears. When I saw him standing there, I thought this was it. He was going to take me back or kill me. He is never touching you again, Decker said fiercely. I swear it on my life. Sheriff McComb came over, his expression grim. He will be back. Men like that do not give up easily. I am going to telegraph the territorial marshal. See if we can get some official protection for Katherine. In the meantime, I want you to be extra careful. Do not go anywhere alone, stick to public places, and if you see him again, come straight to me. Katherine nodded against Decker's chest. He held her for a long moment, then carefully helped her stand. I am taking you home, he said. Mrs. Henley will know what to do. They walked slowly back to the boarding house, with Decker keeping a careful watch on their surroundings. Katherine was still shaking, but she was trying to pull herself together. By the time they reached the front door, she had stopped crying, though her eyes were red and swollen. Mrs. Henley took one look at them and ushered Katherine inside, clucking like a worried hen. She made Katherine tea and sat her down by the fire, wrapping her in blankets. Decker stayed close, not touching her, but near enough that she could see him, could know he was there. After an hour or so, Katherine had calmed enough to talk rationally. He is going to come back, she said. Probably with reinforcements. He has money. He can hire men to do whatever he wants. Then we will be ready, Decker said. Katherine, I want to ask you something, and I want you to think about it carefully before you answer. She looked at him, waiting. Will you marry me? For real, not just as a promise, but as an actual marriage. Because if you are my wife, legally bound to me, Pemberton has no claim on you whatsoever. and I can protect you in ways I cannot if you are just someone I am courting." Catherine's eyes widened. "Decker, you do not have to do this. I do not want you marrying me just to save me from Richard." "I am not," Decker said firmly. "I am asking you to marry me because I love you. I have loved you for weeks now, probably since the day I first saw you jump at that door slamming, and I realized I wanted to spend the rest of my life making sure you never had to be that scared again. The fact that marrying you will also protect you from Pemberton is just an added benefit." Tears were streaming down Catherine's face again, but this time they were different. "You love me?" "With everything I have," Decker said. "And I know we have not known each other that long, and I know you have been through hell and maybe need more time. But, Catherine, time is something we might not have right now. Pemberton could come back tomorrow with a dozen hired guns. I want you protected in every way possible. And yes, I want you as my wife, because I cannot imagine my life without you in it." Catherine looked at the ring on her right hand, then back at Decker's face. "I love you too," she said softly. "I think I have loved you since the day you walked me to Mrs. Henley's and carried my bag and warned me about the blacksmith's hammer. You made me feel like maybe I could be a whole person again, not just broken pieces. Yes, Decker, I will marry you." The smile that broke across Decker's face was like sunrise. He leaned forward and kissed her, gentle and reverent, pouring everything he felt into that moment. When they pulled apart, Mrs. Henley was wiping tears from her own eyes. "Well, it is about time," she said. "I will start spreading the word. We should have the ceremony as soon as possible if you want the protection marriage will give her." "Tomorrow?" Decker suggested, looking at Catherine. She nodded. "Tomorrow? I do not want to wait. I do not want to give Richard any chance to interfere." The next day dawned cold and clear. Decker spent the morning making arrangements with Reverend Michaels and gathering witnesses. Word spread through town like wildfire, and by noon, it seemed like half of Cripple Creek wanted to attend the wedding. The miners from Decker's crew insisted on coming. The parents of Catherine's students wanted to be there. Mrs. Henley and her other boarders would not have missed it for the world. Catherine wore a simple cream-colored dress that Mrs. Henley had helped her alter to fit better. She looked beautiful and terrified in equal measure. Decker wore his best suit, the one he usually saved for funerals and important occasions. His hands were shaking as he stood at the front of the church waiting for her to walk down the aisle. When Catherine appeared in the doorway, Decker felt his breath catch. She was holding a small bouquet of winter flowers that someone had scrounged up, and her eyes were locked on his. She walked slowly down the aisle, and he could see her fighting to keep her composure. When she reached him, he took her hand and squeezed it gently. "You look beautiful," he whispered. "I am terrified," she whispered back. "Me too," he admitted, "but we are doing this together." Reverend Michaels performed the ceremony with appropriate solemnity, though he added personal touches that made it clear this was not just a marriage of convenience. When it came time for the vows, Decker spoke his clearly and firmly, meaning every word. Catherine's voice shook at first, but grew stronger as she went on. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Michaels said with a warm smile. "Decker, you may kiss your bride." Decker did, slowly and sweetly, and the small church erupted in applause and cheers. When they pulled apart, Catherine was crying again, but she was smiling too. "We did it," she breathed. "We did," Decker agreed. "You are Katherine right now, and I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret taking that name." The celebration afterward was modest but heartfelt. Mrs. Henley had prepared a small feast, and the miners had chipped in for whiskey. People came by all afternoon to offer congratulations and good wishes. Sheriff McComb showed up with official marriage papers, which he made sure to file immediately with the Territorial Records Office. As the sun set, Decker and Catherine slipped away from the party. They had rented a small house on the edge of town, nothing fancy but clean and private. Decker had moved his few belongings there that morning, and some of the women in town had helped set up Catherine's things. Standing in the doorway of their new home, Catherine looked up at Decker with wonder. "Is this real? Am I really your wife?" "You really are," Decker said, leading her inside. "And this is our home, our fresh start." That night, they talked until late about their hopes and fears, their dreams for the future. Decker was infinitely patient, letting Catherine set the pace for everything. When she finally fell asleep in his arms, safe and warm and loved, he lay awake for a while, just watching her, marveling at how much his life had changed in just a few short months. But their peace did not last long. 3 days after the wedding, Richard Pemberton returned to Cripple Creek with 4 hired guns. Decker was at the mine when he heard about it, and he ran into town faster than he ever had before. He found Sheriff McComb standing in the middle of the street, facing down Pemberton and his men. Katherine was inside the sheriff's office, looking out the window with terrified eyes. "I am here for my fiancée," Pemberton said loudly enough for half the town to hear. "And I am not leaving without her." "That woman is not your fiancée," Sheriff McComb said calmly. "She is Katherine Wright, legally married wife of Decker Wright. She has no connection to you whatsoever." Pemberton's face twisted with rage. "She is mine. I do not care what piece of paper you have. She belongs to me." "Actually, she belongs to herself," Decker said, stepping forward to stand beside the sheriff. "And she chose me. She chose this life. She chose freedom from you. Now you need to accept that and leave." "Or what?" Pemberton snarled. "You are going to make me? You and this backwater sheriff?" "No," said a voice from behind them. They turned to see a dozen miners emerging from various buildings, all armed. "We are going to make you," said Jack, the foreman from Decker's crew. "We take care of our own in Cripple Creek, and Miss Katherine, Mrs. Wright I should say, she is one of us now. You are not welcome here." More people were gathering now, forming a wall of bodies between Pemberton and the sheriff's office. The shopkeepers, the blacksmith, the women who had helped Katherine set up her school, even some of Katherine's students and their parents. They all stood together, united in their protection of one of their own. Pemberton looked around at the crowd, and for the first time, Decker saw fear flicker in his eyes. "This is not legal. I will have the law on all of you." "You can try," Sheriff McComb said, "but you should know that I have already telegraphed the territorial marshal about your harassment of Mrs. Wright. They have issued a warrant for your arrest on charges of assault and stalking. So, really, you should be thanking me for giving you the chance to leave before I have to enforce that warrant." Pemberton's hands clenched into fists. "Katherine!" he shouted. "Get out here! We need to talk!" The door to the sheriff's office opened, and Katherine stepped out. Decker moved immediately to her side, ready to shield her if necessary. But Katherine stood tall, her chin up, and walked forward until she was standing right in front of Pemberton. "Listen to me very carefully, Richard," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I am not yours. I never was, not really. You do not love me. You never did. You loved the idea of owning me, controlling me, breaking me down until I was nothing but what you wanted me to be. But I am done being afraid of you. I have a husband now who actually loves me, who treats me with respect and kindness. I have a home and a job and friends. I have a life, a real life, and you are not part of it. So, you can leave now with your dignity intact, or you can force the sheriff to arrest you and spend time in jail. Your choice." For a long moment, Pemberton just stared at her. Then he lunged forward, reaching for her with rage-twisted features. But Decker was faster. He pulled Katherine behind him and met Pemberton with a solid punch to the jaw that sent the other man sprawling in the dust. The 4 hired guns reached for their weapons, but they found themselves facing down a dozen armed miners plus the sheriff. They froze, clearly realizing that they were badly outnumbered. "I suggest you pick up your employer and get out of town," Sheriff McComb said quietly, "before this turns into something nobody wants." One of the hired guns helped Pemberton to his feet. The man was bleeding from his mouth, and his eyes were wild with fury and humiliation. "This is not over," he spat at Katherine. "Yes, it is," Katherine said firmly. "Go back to Denver, Richard. Find someone else to torment. I am done." Pemberton and his men mounted their horses and rode out of town at a gallop. The crowd watched them go in silence, not relaxing until they were completely out of sight. Then everyone started talking at once, congratulating Decker on his punch, praising Katherine for her bravery, rehashing the confrontation with excited energy. But Decker only had eyes for his wife. She was shaking again, but there was something different about it this time. It was not just fear. It was also the release of months of tension. "You did it," he said softly, pulling her into his arms. "You stood up to him. You told him no." "We did it," Katherine corrected, her face pressed against his chest. "I could never have done that without you, without all of you." Over the next few days, life slowly returned to normal. Sheriff McComb received confirmation that Richard Pemberton had returned to Denver and that the territorial marshal had indeed issued a formal restraining order against him. If he came within 100 miles of Cripple Creek again, he would be arrested on sight. Katherine's nightmares began to fade. She still jumped at unexpected sounds sometimes, but it was getting rare. She was sleeping through the night more often, waking up in Decker's arms with a smile on her face instead of tears. Her teaching was thriving, and she had started talking about expanding the school to offer classes for adults who wanted to learn to read. Decker continued working at the mine, but he had started saving money with a specific goal in mind. He wanted to buy a small piece of land outside town where they could build a real house, maybe start a family eventually. He had not mentioned it to Katherine yet, wanting to surprise her when the time was right. Winter settled in and hard in December, bringing heavy snows that turned Cripple Creek into a white wonderland. Katherine loved it, often standing at their window and watching the snow fall with childlike wonder. Decker loved watching her discover joy in small things, loved seeing her slowly transform from the frightened woman who had stumbled into town months ago into someone confident and whole. On Christmas Eve, they hosted a small dinner at their house for Mrs. Henley and a few of Katherine's students and their families. The house was filled with laughter and warmth, and Decker found himself feeling grateful beyond words. A year ago, he had been alone, working himself to exhaustion in the mines and wondering if this was all life had to offer. Now he had Katherine, a real home, a community that cared about them both. After everyone left, they sat by the fire, Katherine curled up against Decker's side. He wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. "This has been the best Christmas of my life," Katherine said softly. "Mine too," Decker agreed. "I have something to tell you," Katherine said, and there was a note in her voice that made him look down at her curiously. "What is it?" "I am pregnant." Decker's heart stopped. "What?" Katherine smiled, a little nervously. "I am going to have a baby, our baby. I saw the doctor in town last week to confirm it. I am about 2 months along." Joy exploded through Decker's chest. He pulled Katherine into his arms, holding her tightly but carefully. "A baby! We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Katherine asked, her voice small. "Happy?" Decker pulled back to look at her, and he knew his eyes were probably shining with tears. "Katherine, I am beyond happy. I am ecstatic. A child, our child. I cannot think of anything I want more." Katherine's smile widened, and she kissed him, pouring all her love and relief into it. When they finally pulled apart, they were both crying and laughing at the same time. "I was so scared to tell you," Katherine admitted. "I know we have not been married that long, and everything has been so chaotic. I was worried you might think it was too soon." "It is perfect timing," Decker said firmly. "We are building a life together, Katherine. A family. That is what I have always wanted, and now it is happening. You have given me everything." That night, they talked about names and whether they hoped for a boy or a girl, about what kind of parents they wanted to be. Katherine was nervous about childbirth, which was natural, but Decker promised her he would be there every step of the way. They would get through it together, just like they had gotten through everything else. The months that followed were some of the happiest of both their lives. As Katherine's pregnancy progressed, she glowed with health and happiness. Decker was attentive almost to the point of being overbearing, constantly worried about her doing too much or not eating enough. She tolerated his fussing with good humor, understanding that it came from a place of deep love. In March, Decker finally told Katherine about the land he had been saving for. He took her out on a crisp spring morning to see it. A beautiful 10 acres with a stream running through it and a view of the mountains that took your breath away. "I want to build us a house here," Decker said, watching Katherine's face carefully. "A real house, big enough for our family, with a garden for you and a barn for animals. I want us to have roots, Katherine, a place that is truly ours." Katherine was crying again, but these were happy tears. "It is perfect," she breathed. "When can we start? I have already talked to some of the men from the mine. They said they would help with the building on weekends. If we start now, we should have it done by late summer, before the baby comes." True to their word, the men from the mine and half the town showed up to help with the house. They worked on it every weekend and some evenings after work, determined to have it ready for the new family. Katherine would bring them food and drinks, her belly growing rounder with each passing week. The house took shape slowly but surely, a solid two-story structure with big windows and a wide porch. Katherine made decisions about the layout, where the kitchen would be, how many bedrooms they should have. She chose paint colors and curtains, turning the structure into a home with her personal touches. In early July, with Katherine's due date approaching fast, they moved into the new house. It was not completely finished, but it was livable, and Katherine was adamant about having the baby in their own home, rather than at the boarding house or in town. "I want our child to be born in the house we built together," she said firmly, and Decker could not argue with that logic. On a warm afternoon in late July, Katherine went into labor. Decker sent one of the neighbor boys running for the doctor and the midwife, then settled in for what he knew would be a long wait. Katherine labored through the afternoon and into the evening, and Decker stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement. It was hard watching her in pain, harder than anything he had ever done. But Katherine was strong, stronger than he had ever imagined. She worked through each contraction with fierce determination, never crying or complaining, just focusing on bringing their child into the world. Finally, just as the sun was setting, the baby was born. The midwife cleaned the infant quickly and handed the tiny bundle to Katherine, who was crying and laughing at the same time. "It is a boy," the midwife announced with a smile. Decker looked down at his son, this tiny, perfect creature, with a shock of dark hair and impossibly small fingers, and felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. The baby let out a healthy wail, and Decker found himself laughing through his own tears. "He has got good lungs," he said. "He is perfect," Katherine breathed, cradling their son against her chest. "Absolutely perfect." They named him Daniel Thomas Wright, after Decker's father and the sheriff who had helped protect Katherine when she needed it most. Daniel was a good baby, healthy and strong, with his mother's green eyes and his father's determination. Katherine took to motherhood like she had been born for it, and Decker discovered that he loved being a father even more than he had imagined. Life settled into a new rhythm. Decker continued working at the mine, but he also started taking on carpentry jobs on the side, building furniture and doing repairs for people in town. Katherine went back to teaching part-time once Daniel was a few months old, bringing him with her to the school where he would sleep in a basket while she taught. The students loved having a baby in the classroom, and Katherine's enrollment had grown to nearly 20 children. As Daniel grew from a baby into a toddler, Decker and Katherine watched him with wonder and pride. He was a curious child, always getting into everything, and he had inherited his mother's gentle nature and his father's steady determination. Katherine had long since stopped jumping at sudden sounds. The healing that had started when she first came to Cripple Creek was complete. She was whole now, happy and confident, and deeply in love with the life they had built together. On their second wedding anniversary, they sat on the porch of their house watching the sunset while Daniel played at their feet. Katherine rested her head on Decker's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, marveling at how much had changed since that day she had stumbled into town. "Do you ever think about how different your life would be if you had not come to Cripple Creek?" Decker asked. Katherine was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes. But then I remember that everything that happened, all the bad and the good, led me here. To you, to Daniel, to this life. And I would not change any of it. Not even the hard parts? Not even those," Katherine said firmly. "Because they made me who I am. They taught me that I am stronger than I thought, that I deserve to be loved and treated with respect. And they brought me to you, and you showed me what real love looks like." Decker kissed the top of her head. "You saved me too, you know. I was just existing before you came along, working, going through the motions, not really living. You gave me purpose, gave me a reason to build something lasting." As the years passed, their family grew. Katherine gave birth to a daughter they named Rose in the summer of Daniel's 3rd year, and then another son named James 2 years after that. Their house rang with the sound of children's laughter, and both Decker and Katherine threw themselves into parenting with joy and dedication. Daniel grew into a thoughtful, serious boy who loved books as much as his mother. Rose was spirited and bold, always climbing trees and getting into mischief. James was the baby, sweet and affectionate, who followed his older siblings everywhere. Decker taught his sons and daughter how to ride horses, how to work with their hands, how to treat people with respect. Katherine taught them to read and write, instilled in them a love of learning, and showed them through example what it meant to be kind and compassionate. Catherine's school had become a permanent fixture in Cripple Creek, officially recognized by the Territorial Education Board. She had 3 assistant teachers now, and over 50 students ranging from young children to adults who had never learned to read. She was respected throughout the community, known for her dedication and skill. Decker had moved from mine work to full-time carpentry, building houses and furniture throughout Cripple Creek and the surrounding towns. His reputation for quality work and fair prices meant he always had more jobs than he could handle. They were not wealthy by any means, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. They never heard from Richard Pemberton again. Sheriff McComb kept them informed through the years that the man had married someone else in Denver, a woman from a wealthy family. Catherine felt nothing but pity for whoever that woman was, and hoped she was strong enough to escape if she needed to. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Decker surprised Catherine with a trip to Denver. It was the first time she had been back since fleeing all those years ago, and she was nervous about it. But with Decker by her side and the knowledge that Richard Pemberton would never have power over her again, she found she could walk the streets without fear. They visited the school where she had taught, and Catherine introduced Decker to the few colleagues she still corresponded with. They stayed in a nice hotel, went to the theater, acted like the successful, happy couple they were. Catherine realized that Denver held no more power over her. It was just a place, and all the fear and trauma associated with it had been healed by years of love and safety in Cripple Creek. On the train ride home, Catherine looked out at the passing landscape and felt a profound sense of peace. "I used to think I was broken beyond repair," she said to Decker. "I thought what Richard did to me had destroyed something fundamental in who I was. But I was wrong. I was not broken. I was hurt. And there is a difference. And you helped me heal, Decker. You and this life we built together." "We healed each other," Decker said, taking her hand. "I needed you just as much as you needed me. We saved each other." As the train pulled into Cripple Creek Station, they could see their children waiting on the platform with Mrs. Henley, who had agreed to watch them for the week. Daniel was 12 now, nearly as tall as his mother. Rose was 9, all gangly limbs and bright energy. James was 7, clutching Mrs. Henley's hand and bouncing with excitement. The moment the train stopped, the children rushed forward, and Decker and Catherine were swept up in hugs and excited chatter about everything that had happened while they were gone. Walking home through the familiar streets of Cripple Creek, surrounded by their children, and the town that had become their haven, both Decker and Catherine felt overwhelmed with gratitude. That night, after the children were asleep, they sat on their porch just as they had done so many times before. The stars were brilliant overhead, and the air was sweet with the scent of the wildflowers Catherine had planted around the house. "Do you remember the day we met?" Catherine asked softly. "Every detail," Decker replied. "You were standing in the middle of the street looking like you had seen a ghost. And when old Pete shouted at you, you jumped like someone had struck you. I knew right then that I had to help you, though I could not have told you why. You moved so slowly and spoke so softly," Catherine remembered. "I thought you were just being polite. It took me weeks to realize you were doing it deliberately, that you had noticed my fear and were trying not to add to it. That was when I started to fall in love with you, I think. When I understood that you saw my pain and cared enough to change your behavior to help me heal. I would have done anything for you," Decker said simply. "I still would." "I know," Catherine said, squeezing his hand, "and that has made all the difference." The years continued to roll by, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Daniel went off to college in Denver, determined to become a lawyer who could help people who had been wronged. Rose grew into a beautiful young woman who had no interest in traditional feminine pursuits, instead learning carpentry from her father and eventually taking over his business. James became a teacher like his mother, working alongside her at the school and eventually becoming principal when Catherine decided to retire. Decker and Catherine grew old together, their hair turning gray, their bodies moving slower, but their love never diminishing. They celebrated 40 years of marriage surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, a sprawling family that had all started because one frightened woman had stumbled into Cripple Creek looking for salvation and found it in the form of a kind cowboy who noticed she jumped at sounds. On their 50th anniversary, weak but happy, Catherine and Decker sat on their porch one last time, holding hands as they had done thousands of times before. The house had been expanded over the years, added onto to accommodate visiting family, but the original structure remained, a testament to the life they had built together. "I love you," Catherine said, her her voice thin with age but strong with conviction. "Thank you for saving me, for loving me, for giving me a life worth living." "Thank you for letting me," Decker replied, raising her hand to his lips and kissing it gently. "You made me a better man, Katherine Wright. Everything good in my life started the day you walked into it." They sat there in comfortable silence as the sun set over the mountains, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the ashes of trauma and fear. Their story had started with terror and flight, but it had become one of the greatest love stories Cripple Creek had ever known. When Decker passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, Katherine grieved but did not despair. She had been blessed with 52 years of marriage to a man who had loved her truly and completely, who had seen her at her worst and helped her become her best. She lived another 3 years, surrounded by family, before joining him. They were buried side by side on their land, overlooking the mountains they had both loved. The headstone was simple, but the inscription told their whole story in just a few words. He saw her pain and chose kindness. She found her courage and chose love. Together, they built a life that healed them both. Their descendants continued to live in Cripple Creek, carrying on the legacy of compassion and strength that Decker and Katherine had established. The school Katherine had started still operated, now named in her honor. The carpentry business Decker had built was thriving under Rose's management. And every year on the anniversary of Katherine's arrival in town, the whole family would gather at the house on the hill and tell the story of how their family began. It was a story of trauma overcome and love triumphant. A story of a man who saw a woman's fear and responded with gentleness. A story of a woman who found the strength to stand up to her abuser and claim the life she deserved. But most of all, it was a story of two people who found each other in the wilderness of the American West and created something lasting and beautiful that would echo through generations. And it all started because a cowboy named Decker Wright saw that Katherine Caldwell jumped at sounds, and from that moment on, he moved slower and spoke softer around her, always. That simple act of kindness had changed both their lives forever, proving that sometimes the most profound love stories begin not with grand gestures, but with small acts of compassion from someone who truly sees you and chooses to care.